Sorry.
Okay. Welcome everybody to session 5 of the Unfinished Revolution. And you know, a year ago they were talking about Engelbart's Unfinished Revolution. Well, my picture is the revolution is really just getting started, but it isn't going to be mine. It's got to grow and become something that a lot of people take part in before it really gets going. So all the years we've worked on quite a bit of strategic framework for something that could handle the scale of that. And so I've been presenting things like that in the early part. And we've got a forum going online that's got a few people operating very, very eloquently. And so we nabbed one of them to come in and start talking some at this session, which is, it'll serve him right? And we're also going to try an experiment about getting more involvement with people here. And because one of the things that's difficult for me through all the years is, as I build a framework with different concepts fitting together, it's very hard to know if I just go through and describe them in some order like that. It doesn't seem quite to gel as a whole thing. So somehow we need to pick specifics and interact and kind of then interlace those specifics with the general framework to try to help it grow. And one thing I badly need personally is really more dialogue about these different aspects of this framework of concepts, etc. So we're hoping that we start with something direct. So last week, when we started opening up about what the open hyperdocument system could, there's a spark that got there, partly by Adam coming through with his very reserved, I'm kidding, he's very enthusiastic sort of way, which is very good. So we're going to spend a fair amount of time at the end of the meeting dwelling upon that and try to knit that into some of the larger framework issues. And so the bootstrapping part of that is something in which people say, well, how difficult is it? So you say, well, if I have compound interest on an investment in the bank, then I know that every time I get some interest it goes in there, and then that generates interest. So a compound returning is another way of looking at it. Some people call it double loop feedback, etc. But the basic thing is, if you're going to make headway at improving things, improving capabilities of collective work, and then you take notice that the improvement infrastructure of our society actually is generally a collective process, well, that's very good. That if we early try to emphasize boosting our collective ability, called collective IQ, it's a set of capabilities we've named Kodiak. So if we say, okay, let's start working consciously to improve that, and then as you improve it in clusters of effort around the world, where should you deploy it best? Well, that's a choice. And it turns out, if you want to look strategically, one of the really optimal choices would be to employ those improvements you had within the improvement infrastructure. In fact, the improvement infrastructure that's trying to improve your collective IQ. And then as that gets better and better, you start saying, now I can start disseminating the capabilities out around the world more, and a good place to do that would be in the other parts of the world's improvement infrastructure. So that's what the bootstrapping thing really talks about, and it's not all that complicated. But this time we thought, well, let's take two kinds of things. One is a very broad scale issue, and the other is a specific one, and just look at both of them to see, can they sort of play together in a framework we're talking about. And so this huge scale is one thing that needs to be entered in. We spent time at the beginning, and several people objected because we brought it up several times in different sessions about the global scale of the sort of millennium projects and the 15 big challenges to society that are judged to be very large. And so you look and say, how do we get, those have to be dealt with collectively. And collectively means they're disseminated, that solutions aren't going to be by one small pocket of people or something. They have to be involved, quite a few people in sort of an assorted community that's going to be dealing on that. So those are the kind of scales that if the world can't produce the scale of ability and capability to do this collective IQ a lot better in scales like that, we're still going to be in a great deal of trouble, even though an individual company or group or team might be a lot more effective. It's just very, very important to get effective in the large scale. And then you can easily point to things that we'll go do now. And so anyway, this unfinished revolution, I persist in assuming that it can only succeed if it applies to a truly scalable strategic approach. Scalable. So I'll keep poking at that. And sometimes over the last years, decades, that this has gotten me in trouble with people because they'll say, well, we want to get started, look. And I say, well, there are various choices you can make and the directions you're going to take. Can't we talk about the strategic framework in which to choose them? You're just trying to get in the way. So anyway, what we'd like to do is to get a broad enough spectrum of people over the different levels, etc., interacting and things, so that something about this evolves as a strategic framework. And assumedly, it may be quite different from mine, but it might still be more successful in my picture. But the idea of going after that is important. So we have we're lucky today to have a visit from Professor Ohashi from Japan. And it turns out that he, besides being a very active guy in the world's committees of various sorts and products, also was appointed to be the president of an organization that's called the Bootstrap Alliance Japan. And this emerged after two different visits into Japan. And so he just popped across the Pacific like it was nothing to come here and maybe do something else. But anyway, between us we worked out the idea, if you talk about the quality movement in the world, that was something that's been underway for 40 years, 40, 50, and it just steadily assumed a bigger and bigger proportion or perspective on its quality movement until almost every serious big manufacturing outfit in the world is involved in that kind of quality stuff. And it's been a very successful thing about that. So we say, okay, in a way that's a model about how one got a whole bunch of stuff working in there. In another way, it's also something that says, okay, what if we introduce, if we're successful at boosting collective IQ in communities at large, how much can that really sort of put new horsepower into the quality movement? And so we say, okay, that's a very interesting sort of challenge. So we're not sure whether he's a professor and he's used to giving lectures. So what he's going to say, but we're following him then with somebody local that works at SRI that's been very involved in the quality thing to try also to sort of point out some relationships. So are you ready, Professor Ohashi, to come and give them a talk? And I have to then go and find him. Oops, wrong bunch. Well, come on. Let's just see. Are we...
Looks as though it's trying to open it.
Oh, it says it's got Far East stuff in it.
Sure enough.
So we say, okay. It's all his fault. God. What it really does, I click too many times on the same one. I apologize. Come in advance.
Thank you very much. This is our honor to speak this colloquium. And I will brief introduction to the Japanese activity and also relating quality control and bootstrap activities. So we now call total quality management system, basically starting with QC. QC means quality control, controlled quality products. So early 70 and early 80, this is a strong tool for the Japanese production. So early 80 and next decade, we called developing this system total quality control. This is a control plus management system. So, and 95 or early 90, we standardized, we called TQM. TQM is a total quality management system. This is a control plus management plus strategy. So cross-functional process management system is a TQM. So this is a paradigm shift of TQM. First generation quality control is enterprise organization image is manufacturing. So next generation is TQC is product competitive power is the most important thing. But now TQM means respectable existence. This is most important thing the early 90 or probably next century. So target is first decade, first generation QC system has production quality, only production quality. But TQC second generation means product service quality is more higher level. But TQM aims management quality. Also, quality intention is conformity is meaning at the QC, and the TQC means customer satisfaction. But the TQM means, excuse me, stakeholder satisfaction. This is a little different. Also, quality guarantee solution is a QC is a product outs, but the TQC is a market in, and also TQM the society in. Means environmental problems or many complex problems has occurs at last 1990. So control object is very different. QC is controlled production, but TQC controls process, and the TQM controls management system. Object is very different. So idea of TQM is quality of management and also improvement of total quality. Quality means very different compared with QC activities. Management science means TQM not management, means not equal management. TQM is equal methodology of management science. That is a very important thing. Also, a vision of TQM aim is a respectable existence, means co-delighting relationship with the stakeholder, and also competitive and praised ability, and activity is a technology and the speed and flexibility, and also a vitality. Vitality means recently knowledge management system is very close to the vitality, is make one's presence felt is most important thing. Also, a methodology of TQM is very complex. One is including ordinary method, is all including BPR or concurrent engineering or total productive maintenance or total productivity, just in time, and Six Sigma, ISO 9000, also CARS is very interesting in based on the TQM. But TQM method is little different. TQM method is QC story, task accomplished. This is the very best one on the QC activities. And also Q7. Q7 is a QC 7 tools. Also Pareto analysis or something like that. But we are arranging new QC 7 tools. We call it N7. And also P7 is a new one. This is a planning 7 tools. And also S7. S7 means strategy, 7 tools. Also quality function development, reliability, engineering. Also many operations research methods is included. And TQM aims unify of management method based on the operations research or some another new statistical analysis and new management or technology. Also, a strategy of TQM is cooperation strategy, business strategy, functional strategy, and management strategy submits always what to do. But usually management strategies didn't say how to do. This is not submitted. Also, life stage is most important thing in the next century. It means a life cycle assessment. This is most important thing for the productive and more policy-oriented or many social systems or life cycle assessment. This is most very important thing. So TQM is suitable this life stage cycle. Also, TQM means open transparency of activities. PDCA cycle is like this. It is a review process, is called top management, and also planning process, and also performance process, and also verify and improvement process. This is four processes most important in PDCA cycle. This is invented by the Deming. Plan, P means a plan, D means do, and C means check, A means review processes. Action is review processes. Usually, all the one system is only 3 cycle. 3 cycle means DCA, do and plan, do, see system is older one. But now PDCA cycle. This is adopted for the ISO 14,000 for the environmental assessment. And also, resource management is important. Resource means information and also IT technology, also including the human resources. And the quality improvement of management system is leadership, vision, and strategy is also important. And the progress of organization is one of the final aim of total quality management system. Technology, speed and flexibility, vitality is means. And also ISO 9000 and TQM is a close relationship. ISO 9000 is the quality assurance model, and also manage and perform and verify is important thing on the ISO 9000, and the conformance is also means. And the TQM is quality management. So building a quality in the process. In the process is most important. On the process and in the process is most important thing. Performance is also important. So framework of TQM is like this. Lower level of base of a methodology of TQM I mentioned formally, and also resource is important. IT technology and information and human system, human resources. And third important thing, the quality improvement of management system. Original QC system means quality improvement of a product system, but now quality improvement of management system is important. So this is based on the framework of TQM. So they aims progress of organization. And after this conclusion is a respectable existence with stakeholders. That is final aim of TQM. The future of TQM is now TQM has a strong relationship with knowledge management system. This is also resource management system, and this formula is not only a basic elementary algebra. This is a pure mathematics, like a group theory or a field theory like this. KM means knowledge management. So P means people, and plus means technology, and K means knowledge. S means speed, but probably recently we are now developing this formula. Probably S means log S or exponential schemes, because recently we call the mouse year. Mouse year is very, very high-speed changing year around Silicon Valley. So in Japan is now a dog year. So probably 2 or 3 years ago, advances, we are approaching mouse year. So organizational plus individual knowledge is a very important thing. So organization is based on the TQM in Japan, but individual knowledge is based on probably a knowledge management on the system. The socialization, externalization, and the combination, internalization is most important thing. So knowledge model is very complex, but data and information is a lot of things on the internet. But structural system is most important thing for the knowledge-based system, but probably open hyperdocument system and many other Engelbart's papers says knowledge is most important thing for the society or many people. So we think also wisdom, relationship with wisdom or improvement system dynamically related with wisdom, between wisdom and knowledge. This cycle is most important thing. So learning to knowledge management is most important thing, because education is only a part of knowledge. So lecture is a more smaller one. So knowledge is structured is individually learning activities. So education is only assisted learning. So learning is the most important activities on the individual scheme. So and finally, TQM and Bootstrap activities. TQM and means A and B activities. Also a subset of Bootstrap activities. And also TQM plus KM future model is trying to approach C activities. But probably very difficult to this scheme, because Bootstrap activities based on digitalized system, and also meaning is very important thing is Bootstrap activities is totally activated on the Engelbart theory. But our TQM system is only trying to approach in the C activities, only a meta-theory level. So TQM means a subset of bootstrapping. And also many Japanese project is proceeding on the spirit of bootstrapping. For example, is satellite project with the United States, educational contents through the United States to the through the Asian people, and totally and many other trial in Japan are proceeding now, and next generation probably combining bootstrap activities with including TQM and the knowledge management system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And what you sit here and think about with this is the scale. There's a worldwide quality movement really working out there. So on one thing, it's like whatever else you talk about in the bootstrapping sense, it needs to be able to integrate. There's so much value there in process, learning about the processes, etc. So it's just be stupid to start, setting off. We're going to have a separate way in putting together human system processes idea. That's where the Kodiak's integration part of it comes out there, that we have to integrate. And there's the integration of the worldwide, what's learned and valuable in that, and what can we add it if you bring in the kind of collective IQ and improvement infrastructure enhancement and such we talk about. It's very important to do, but we can't say the bootstrapping is just going to do it. It's going to have to merge and participate. So that's why the collective work is so important, that we can find ways to reach across into all of what's going on there. But also the other aspect of it is a national program in there that every nation's got to be able to participate, which puts a global stress. If you're going to have an open hyper-document system, it has to support the collaborative activities throughout all the things he's mentioning, but also the things we talk about and the interaction of that. It's just terribly important. So the next speaker, I realized that there would have been a much better way for me to have Oh, that's right. He's going to talk without slides. Right. Well, thank you for reminding me.
That's fine.
Well,
thanks. Let's see.
That's Norman McEachran from SRI. He's a specialist in quality, etc., in there too, and you've got another title someplace in there too.
Oh yeah, productivity and so on.
So,
when I was asked by Marcelo to comment on Dr. Ohashi's presentation, I felt humble in a way because of all of the experiences I have had in my career. The visit that I made to Japan in 1981 to look at the Japanese quality movement, to interview members of that movement, including Junichi Takuchi and Professor Ishikawa and Dr. Noguchi, who was at that time heading the Japan Union of Scientists and Engineers. That was one of the most important, if not the most important, formative experience in my whole career. And one of the things that was striking about, I think, Dr. Ohashi's talk was how many deep tools and approaches and perspectives have been woven into total quality. If I were to take out the M or the C at the end of it, if we were just to talk about total quality the way I do sometimes as a consultant, it's the total system perspective. Of course, I graduated from Stanford in 1979. I was finding out how much I didn't know about the campus since then when I was coming over, and finding out how many roads have been constructed in places that used to be pathways. But when I thought back at that time how much learning I did in Japan by simply observing how Japanese companies, despite the language barrier, observing how Japanese companies were, in effect, thinking about the early stages of the bootstrap process through continuous improvement, Kaizen. If you think about continuous improvement, it was being mobilized in Japan through the workforce involved in production as early as the 1960s, based on Deming's original lectures to Japanese managers in 1950. So it's a 50-year-old tradition this year in Japan. And this tradition has grown, as Professor Ohashi has described, from focusing on production and product to total customer satisfaction, which is still how many companies in the United States view it today, to, in effect, total planetary responsibility and stakeholder responsibility when you consider the larger perspective that he had identified. What I find fascinating is to think back to those early days and think about it in relationship to what we now call knowledge management. Back then, there wasn't such a thing, at least it didn't get the big press. But I can remember attending a meeting. It turned out to be a very privileged occasion, the 1,000th meeting of QC circles in Japan in April of 1981. And at that time, I had the privilege of sitting and listening to presentations by Japanese workers that were as sophisticated in their understanding of process and their ability to communicate to other people about that understanding as anything I had seen industrial engineers do in the United States. So what we were seeing there was the ability to do something that has become a famous book title, and I gather it's attributed to Joel Birnbaum, If Only We Knew What We Know. One of the things about knowledge management today is, in effect, uncovering what we know, making it explicit and tangible enough to share and use for improvement in locations different from where the knowledge was originally discovered. That process in various ways is TQM or TQC. It is also knowledge management. It is also benchmarking, which I made my professional career on at SRI, which is in effect observing other organizations, matching against a client organization's needs and uncovering opportunities for improvement. Virtually all of those activities come together around the idea of continuous improvement. So the plan, do, check, action cycle that Professor Hohashi described is one of those unifying things that from the very first days of Deming's original lectures in Japan to the present day, looking at the complete scope of TQM, even at the societal level, we are still focusing on that basic process. And I see an intimate relationship between plan, do, check, action in that larger sense and the Kodiak process itself. The process of continuous learning by plan, do, check, action. And I've also done some work over the years in looking at the relationship between plan, do, check, action and the scientific process. If we remember, any of us have taken the sociology of science, as I did when I was at Stanford, one of the things that is interesting is look at science as a process as opposed to just the results of science. How do we operate? In science, we do plan, do, check, action. The same Kodiak process of learning from experience and integrating and communicating is part of the scientific community's way of making progress. So there's such a fundamental relationship among the things I see Professor Hohashi talking about that in a way it describes what humanity needs to do in an ongoing way, understanding more and more about complex systems in order to put together better ways to manage not only our organizations but our politics and our international relationships as well. So there's just a tremendous scope in what's there. I might also comment in closing that my visit to Japan and my study of total quality and total quality management is what I would call my secret weapon. In every consulting assignment I've ever done, the principal tools that I have used have been derived from total quality. Those tools are absolutely universal, from the 7 QC circle tools through to the planning and strategy tools. Those tools are incredibly powerful for understanding systems in a group context so that people learn together about them and to be able to make improvements. So while it sounds like there's a movement there that's focused somewhat narrowly, I see In fact, TQM is a process for almost universal improvement and is so intimately related to bootstrapping that it's hard to describe a boundary between them. Thanks.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah. Well, that's sort of more example of, you know, the kind of integration that you could say, well, if everybody that was interested in what I've been talking about just moves into that camp of total quality, could we help them boost? And then you stop thinking, well, it's going to take a mixing in of communities with different kind of composition from the ones that are generally in total quality in order to sort of boost the kind of collective knowledge capability we're talking about. And but anyway, we ought to feel like there isn't any way that you could set up a bootstrapping community would stand all by itself. It's got to be one that reaches out and really gets involved with lots of communities. And so there'll be communities of communities, etc. So this part of the kind of strategic framework is how do you start cultivating what communities can be brought in early and what you could do with them. So today we're going to move on into the OHS kind of thing with some of the ways it could evolve. But when it evolves, it really needs, you know, user communities, because it's the interaction cycle with the user communities who are the ones that have been focusing on the human system side of it to get the coevolution you want, but also to get the interoperability you want. And if you build open hybrid document prototypes and there's such things that in the end couldn't evolve to fit these needs, then we say, hey, back up, you know, we're not going in the right direction. We could have fun making local pretty toys, but if it's a strategic push like that, we need to keep thinking about the sort of requirements for the grown-up open hyperdocument system that there'd be in there. And let's see. Sometimes I've gotten confused. Not just sometimes, I'll make you pardon, but so I have to back up farther than I should have had to get back on my track. So I should have thought ahead better. Is that going?
Seems not to be. You could actually go to the file menu and say open.
There we go. Okay. I wish there were some shortcut key to hit on the keyboard when it's in that mode to go. Anyway, so this is the kind of thing we're going to be talking about today, and I could have given you a long discourse in all kinds of aspects of bootstrapping, but I sort of intend to instead to kind of go through it in a cursory way and then get more examples coming out, and like we point to the later, we'll see that. So we want to talk something about the model for any organization, and we'll get some dialogue going in that. We've already then heard about the TQM as a very, very significant big thing to do it. And then we want to do some specific examples later on the bootstrapping, the OHS evolution, and the open source way of doing it. And we're going to try opening up in the middle of this thing with more dialogue. And since you guys are here, we can grab you. You're going to be the ones elected to participate today. If people out at a distance, we wish we had the environment set up so that we could really be doing real-time interaction and collaboration with them. So, you've seen this diagram before, and the thing about this capability infrastructure is just very, very real. And one of the things that'd be very handy in my world is to start getting people interacting about capability infrastructures. Hey, what capabilities seem to come up to the top in a given organization, and which subordinate capabilities down there do they depend upon, and which of those lower order capabilities are ones that many of the higher level capabilities have to depend upon too as components of their infrastructure. So it's that sort of, not a hierarchy, but a multiple interlacing on down of dependence on there that gives it an infrastructure idea. And so one of the powers that just came to me looking at that initially back in the early 60s was, oh, if we're talking about making a significant difference in how people can think and collectively work together, that's going to be applicable throughout these infrastructures. And so as they are, they'll change the nature of almost any component capability in there. Well, when you change the nature of one of them down here, that'll make it a different candidate for inclusion in some of the higher level ones, which independently, since they can do their knowledge work better, would probably change, but now they can change about the way in which they knit together other things down there. So that whole infrastructure is likely to start changing. And the thing that's changeable clear down at the bottom level down there is how we learn how to harness people's native sensory, perceptual, motor, and cognitive activities. See? And those things have all also been conditioned through the years to work with this sort of infrastructure as it was. So the very language we've employed, for instance, we grew up thinking that that's the natural way humans interact. Well, it's the natural way in the environments that we've been involved with, of course. But some of that environments is, well, what's the natural language you use? Well, if you're going into some stronger discipline or something, you need to start learning a new vocabulary and new verbs and nouns and adjectives and ways to work like this, yes, to get effective in there. And then we could say, well, we can actually start modifying the actual physical interface with which we interact out in the world, because now that doesn't have to be quite like this. The ways I can communicate directly with people could probably get a much wider band if I learned better ways to communicate. And that's one of the reasons why last week I talked about Neil Scott's activity with the handicap, where they're really learning different modes of using the kind of sensory and perceptual and motor activities that those people are left with. And it's a very, very important thing to say, okay, you know, we sit here and think that because we are endowed with a balanced set of capabilities about sensory and motor capabilities that, oh, we're doing it the right way. No, there's just a lot of change potentially down there. So if you start changing the interface here with the kind of functional capability of all the tools and then the human system change, these infrastructures are in for just huge readjustments. And so happenstance, as they will cause a lot of strange things happening. And it'd be very handy as if you could get a better and better perception downstream of what's coming in different places, so organizations are more ready for suddenly realizing that some very dominant capability right here is going to be replaced by two, or will merge with another one and be much more effective. And so those things need foresight ahead to think about and looking at, and planning, and collective capability about handling the transitions of that, etc. So those are the B parts you have to get ready for and see like that. So you say, okay, we've got a picture here. So then one thing we'd like to do is just have some dialogue among you guys, and Marcelo Hoffman's going to practice his sort of legerdemain as being a group recorder, and he'll call on me once in a while to get any arguments or something. We're just going to see if we get people talking. And what I like to talk about is this model and the idea of calling it a social organism. It says, okay, what does it represent? See, on the one hand, it could represent a person. See? On the other hand, it could represent a nation or something like that. So I'd like some dialogue, because I don't know what's getting across. So Marcelo, you start.
The next slide, the questions you had.
Oh, that.
Yeah. And then I play the recorder. So if you want to say.
All right. So anyway, it'd be interesting to get the ideas of people, well, what specific examples of types of social organism would interest you? And some of them you might say, hey, I don't think that model will work for those, or will it work, or what can we do? But just taking that And what can we say about if you pick different social organisms to talk about what's the adequacy of their improvement infrastructure within that, the regular infrastructure?
And I'll be happy to be the scribe here. So please, if you would like to contribute, we would love to start a dialogue going on. So,
Boy.
Well, one social organism that actually has a capability improvement infrastructure is the large industries, very large companies, Fortune 100 companies. They often use management advisory firms like Ernst & Young as their capability improvement infrastructure. And they can select among different companies. Those different management advisory companies give best practices. So in a way, they've outsourced it to a certain extent, which actually makes some sense because these companies like Ernst & Young can go around and collect ideas from many different companies. So I think the remarkable thing here is not how well the bear dances, but the bear dances at all. I'm not saying it's a great system, but at least these companies have actually thought about, all right, how do we improve our capability infrastructure, and actually spend real money to bring in new ideas. Whereas I think a lot of social organisms have absolutely nothing in terms of a formal structure to try to do that.
I had a similar reaction in some ways. Being involved as I have been for the last 20 years in benchmarking, I've seen it used as a systematic improvement process at several different levels in an organization. There's the nature of learning good practices from other companies, which is in part a process of humility. In part, it's a political process. Benchmarking, that is looking at what other companies have done, is somewhat akin to a scientific experiment that says, yes, this really is possible to do. No, we don't have to continue to do it the way we've always done it. Something else is available. And the difference between benchmarking and traditional management consulting advice is that the consultant can sometimes get perceived as a person who's speaking in a way not quite realistically, or is that really possible? But in doing a benchmark, you're actually looking at operative practices that have been proven successful by companies who have a track record. That way, you get over the argument it can't be done, and you begin to unfreeze the organization to admit the possibility of change. So it becomes not only an objective or a sort of a learning process, but a learning to learn process as well.
Okay, it's all left hand with this hand. Okay.
Left brain.
Okay. I guess I wanted to question the slide. I don't see that slide, in my view, as talking about a recursive process to improve anything, but simply taking apart what exists. Mentally, I construct the left-hand side of that slide as the social systems, the communication systems, the knowledge. Then there's the human systems that are actually working on human perception and learning, training, skills. There's a tool set, and then there's capabilities that we derive from the interaction of all those things. So any organization has those characteristics, whether or not they're choosing to consciously improve them. Governments come to mind, just any social organization we have.
Why don't we keep taking this? I was hoping, oh yes, we can see these. And then we will have a discussion with Doug commenting. I'm trying to put maybe a little bit to the right. Okay.
I actually had a very similar comment. I was going to say it in probably a more caustic manner. I'm not sure if I think the first question that you ask, what specific example of social organisms that can be modeled this way, I'm not sure if that's a fair question. I think that, maybe a better question is what social organisms cannot be modeled that way. I'm not sure if I can think of an example where you can't take any kind of organization and demonstrate how it relies on certain infrastructure, both tool systems, human systems, and so forth. The second question I think is more interesting, and I think it goes back to what your presentation was actually, I think, in the second session. One of the problems really is that it's easy to be sitting in a classroom and to say, you know, hey, these are things that organizations have to think about. And I think it's easy for management to be sitting around saying, hey, these are, you know, we've got to deal with improving our infrastructure. But the question is, what incentive is there for them to improve? And I think the reality of the situation is a lot of time, you know, organizations are bottom line. They want to see, you know, if I'm going to invest in this improvement in infrastructure, I want to see, you know, profits or some other kind of, you know, bottom line improvement.
Oh, please.
Well, I'm interested in noticing what works, and I've been in a field of computing where a very large fraction of the big projects actually fail. And they fail typically after investing an enormous amount of resources. Then at the end it didn't come together. Now the one fellow that I've met who made it very clear how to completely avoid those giant failures is this fellow Tom Gilb. And he had only 3 little details to take care of. One is, what is it you're trying to do? What are your goals? I mean, to the point where you can get a numerical measure of how well you've met each goal. And secondly, he addresses the problem of document after document being prepared with no check on whether we're still going in the same direction by doing some an analysis in a very specific 3-person, 4-person group, which he calls inspection. And then the final thing is never to allow more than about 1/20th of the project's resources to be consumed before you deliver an improved working system. And if you do that, then you can't have more than 5% failure at any one time. And it vastly reduces the problem and gives you redirection of your projects while you're going along the course. It's like we do not start at one end of the Mississippi River and say, now which direction is New Orleans? Now we'll set the boat and tie the rudder. No, no. You want to make corrections very often, especially in big projects. So doing them in lots of little pieces is enormously important.
I was thinking in terms of a negative example that might spawn positive. I was thinking in terms of a negative example that might spawn positive thinking, and that is the way the software industry has tended to forget the lessons learned along the way. And the specific example I was thinking of is speech recognition. We've been, since '89 that we've been using systems, we've had peaks and troughs where when Windows came along, all that we'd learned about DOS got thrown out, but with it, all the things we'd learned about speech recognition got thrown out in terms of how it was used. And so we started off with very primitive systems again. And then as we went through each version, it was obvious that a new team of people came on to create each version, and they didn't go back and learn what we already knew. And so we'd have these crappy designs each time that would then eventually evolve through and maybe catch up with the old ones. But it just seems that we never seem to learn that lesson.
I think we have examples of super organizational learning structures in markets where companies are competing for production of some good or service like automobiles or cameras or stereo equipment, and because the metrics are well known and mature, They all know that they're going to be competing, they're going to be compared, and they end up in kind of a coalition improvement infrastructure, even though the specific improvements occur at the company level. They're all sort of involved in a learning organism together.
Well, I've had the privilege of listening in to meetings of a large Fortune 500 company, which I can't name, but it's interesting to hear the management turnover, sometimes a new boss every 90 days, people who don't really know what they're doing and can't agree, but seem to be determined that things are going to be done that way, and that can take months or years to do anything about. Practically speaking, I mean, you can talk about introducing all these ideas, but unless you have some way of goal setting that can somehow numerically evaluate goal setting itself, I don't think that these things are ever going to be useful in practice, because there are too many egos involved and too much churn.
One thing that seems to be being said is that the question should be not about social organisms, but about social disorganizations. It seems that we often lump a group of people, maybe at a company or a project or government or whatever, as an organization, when really it isn't. It's just a group of people happen to be in the same building or something.
Yes, I think we've been talking a great deal about organization and process, but it strikes me that in all of our symposiums, including the one today, one of the common factors in all of the things we discuss is values, that organizations are attempting to establish and produce values. And I think that the complexity of trying to do that, whether it's with religion or products or whatever it might be, is at the heart of much of what we're here to discuss. When I think personally, for instance, of a large, complex problem of the kind we're describing here, excuse me, I would describe it to myself as a problem that if you don't solve it, it will attack you. It will be a consequence for not solving an urgent, complex problem. And so often they are involved with, again, values. So the question arises, how do you deal with those things? How do you deal with the values that get in the way with the onset of the solution, as this gentleman here was just saying, for example?
I think so far seems to be most attention is focused on the commercial type of companies. I think for government or particularly military, we probably need different kind of focus or different techniques. Probably the general framework can be modified a little bit. From my experience with consulting to the military here, I think particularly the software project, most company in the Fortune 500, they can pay very high salary to very best programmer. But for the military, they don't have that kind of luxury. So they usually pay very low, and even they give a contract, is doesn't give very high profit margin. So I think we need to look at several factors. One is the incentive part of how can a non-profit to have a motivation to improve itself. Number two is the budget process. How can the budget process be improved? The third thing is the mentality of the organization. For example, in the military, most commanders say, I want to conquer that hill in 2 days. Okay? They have that mentality. But in software, you cannot say I finished this in 2 days. Okay, and that's number one. Number two, in military, sometimes you can say I want to send more people. If I cannot conquer that hill, I send 10 times more people. But in software, usually 10 times more people actually causing more problems. Okay, so there's a lot of things like that. So I think our framework probably need to think in for different organization, different type of organization may have a different emphasis.
One of the things that I think is striking, especially in the Valley, is the difference in teams working together in a startup venture versus in an established company. And I think that would be useful in terms of looking at that infrastructure and how it operates differently in a high-performance team that does get a lot of work done, a lot of innovative work, and other teams that seem to get bogged down in a lot of political discussions and meetings and really don't produce what they set out to produce.
One of the common themes that seems to be underlying a lot of the scenarios we're bringing up, someone mentioned the incentive that we have to change or improve. Well, the opposite side of that is also what is the cost or the effort in time and dollars in my personal career being at stake, for instance, in pursuing a particular path. Am I, as an engineer on the front line whose boss is saying we need this result in 2 months, going to rely on my own wits, or am I going to access somebody else's idea and give that idea a try? So there are some fundamental human issues, I think, in relation to this, and part of what a knowledge management system, I think, needs to do is to help us access the knowledge that's out there with a minimum risk, maximum ease, and convenience, so that we can take advantage of it given our priorities.
I think we want to kind of close this sub-session, if you would, because that will take it from here to the next level of bootstrapping. But we wanted to make sure that we got some feedback to get a sense for the audience and make sure that we are as interactive as we can. Thank you for taking us from here. I think. Thank you very much. And we would like feedback afterwards also. Next.
That's very interesting. So a couple of comments at the outset that so many of the people initially said, oh, they were assuming this is a corporation. So that, that's fine. So that's one kind of social organism. And there are quite a few others in our society that are important too that we should improve. A university or the whole higher education system, for instance, or the entire education system, for instance, of which each of those is a sub-component capability. They improve the capability of the scientific teams distributed around the world that together are trying to solve cancer problems, or the people around the world that are trying to actually not only clarify but tackle some of those grand challenges that the Millennium Project was done. So anyway, there are all these different kinds, and in each one you can point to a lot of instances where today, they are less than perfect. So, in the benchmarking sense that Norman was talking about, it says, oh, when would we learn to sort of go out and sort of assess what the collective IQ of that organism seems to be? And it'd be very, very nice if they had a benchmarking way in which there was enough collective interest in that in the world that, just like the quality movement, they go around and can really assess and find people with leadership, and you can give awards to the companies, the outfits that do the best quality. So how far away are we from learning enough about what the collective IQs are to go out there and give awards to the companies? Another aspect of the thing is, that's what consultants are for. So you say they're the ones that are there to tell you where to go. So, and a consultant that comes and says, let me tell you how to do it, is one kind of help. That's maybe some of the C work, etc., like that. But how much different that is from saying, hey, we can show you, come and look at the way our organization runs. So, you know, the quality movement has to do that, where there's interaction between guys that operate drill presses and shapers, as also what the engineers work, etc. So there are all those levels of interaction, and they have to be talking to each other about this. You know, and the consultants can do help and guidance or something, but if you're really going to do an evolutionary thing in a big way, that sort of seems to fall short, unless the consultants are saying, we operate collectively with the highest IQ in the world, so you come and look and we'll help you learn. So if you find them like that, that's great. And it'd be very, very interesting to start taking, you know, the leaders in the information technology business out there and say, oh, would you mind opening the doors and showing us how you use information technology to boost your collective capabilities to do things. Don't just tell us about your products or give us a demo in a demo room about how you use your products. Show us of how you do your work differently and newly. So that would be a big change in the world out there like that. So it's sort of so much from what I understood about the way the quality movement in the world works. It's sort of like that. You know, the doors are sort of open for you to show from your factory what the quality activities you do. It doesn't mean you open the door for the product information or something like that that's in there, but these processes that make a difference in there. And about 9 years ago, you know, one division of a big company had just won this big prize. What's the name of that?
The Baldrige Award.
Baldrige Award. And they came to one of the meetings of our Bootstrap meeting, and they were all excited. And they said, boy, just think of this. There were these executives that used to be so stiff and closed like this. What are they saying now? They're saying, hey, the thing to do is, yes, compete like hell out the front door, but cooperate closely out the back doors together like this. Well, things about that kind of attitude, if the quality movement started getting that to prevail, it was just a terrifically valuable human system cultural sort of improvement. So that's in there. So the ideas of sharing, etc., I'll talk a little more about that later too. But this incentive sort of thing, you know, people are bottom line, and this is talking corporations, and boy, if the stock market keeps like it is now, and the day traders that work heavily like that, just every little dip, you know, a CEO is going to be, somebody can pound on him for a dip or something like that, much less for quarterly not meeting the good expectations, so the stock price goes down a bit. So how in the world can a guy that's in that position invest very much beyond the next quarter? See, it's sort of hand-tied. So how did the, you know, the board of directors deal with them like that? So you said, boy, this whole perspective of the forced inattention of the commercial, industrial, you know, the people that have corporations on the market, the forcing there to be so short-term, and so how does this speak about how long-term things are solved? In the same way the marketplace, like in an automobile marketplace, once you got an environment where the consumers were busy, you know, doing their thing and there wasn't that much distinction among them, then the marketplace does a lot to drive up quality and price down, etc., like that. But in this thing of what do you do to help people help organizations boost their collective knowledge work capability, which is going to be extremely critical in the future about how smart organizations can be, how well they harness their individual talents. Well, you know, if that can't blossom in ways because there aren't going to be sharing, or in the marketplace out there, if the thing that the vendors of the information technology hype is so much short-term and pushing, and they're putting money into what they think they can sell and get market share. So you look at that dynamic and you say, how much does that kind of dynamic serve this need for organizations to get collectively smarter? See? So the only way I can see that marketplace would work in that respect is if the organizations that want to get collectively smarter get a lot smarter about where they want to go and what the future really has. And we sort of showed this sort of coevolutionary frontier out there in a very simple two-dimensional way. But there's so many paths out there that dig down deeper or take different routes, etc., that it says, okay, what's going to cost me to take a blind alley, to listen to a given pitch from the vendors, etc., like that, and go that direction. And I don't have any other picture about where it's all going to happen out in that foggy distance. So the thing about doing this collective work on scenarios out there and really keeping case studies out in the open in the study, a lot of the things that the quality movement's gone, so that you can guide yourself. So it just looks like the very, very important. So anyway, they're just talk about schizoid organizations. You say different factors in the organization got different plans. Well, you look at a real schizophrenic person, which personality they have when you look at them a given time. So, you know, split personalities are you got organisms with example that, well, boy, they're not going to be able to perform very well. So what's going to happen out in the world of sort of competition or whatever it is for organizations to realize that, you know, to reduce the amount of schizoidness in them will be a huge difference. Not that they shouldn't have difference of ideas and opinions, but if they have different commitments or something, this is very bad. So anyway, there are a lot of things to talk about in here, and I just very much enjoyed what you were talking about. Let's move on and open up the possibility of doing another one. So here's the kind of thing starting to talk about bootstrapping. So it says, suppose I have a social organism whose major product out there is something that, you know, as a matter of fact, is a product that can make a difference in how people's improvement, you know, organizations' improvement infrastructure works. Oh wow, if we sort of feed that back, then we got bootstrapping. So the better you get at doing your product, the better you're going to get at improving what you're trying to do, which means this will get better, which means you get better at this. And that's really that compounding thing. So that's the basic sort of picture about bootstrapping. And it could work in any size infrastructure. So it's very important that we start learning how in different kinds of infrastructures you can introduce these kind of new capabilities to improve and get in there. So that means, this really means a lot. So that's the kind of thing the C community stuff is going to do. Well, there's another thing to think about. It says, well, what if it's an organization, only part of its output is that applicable? Oh, great. Still worth bootstrapping, right? So different organizations or institutions out there, the kind of major thing they're trying to do have different amounts of potential feedback. That means different amounts of potential for what they do could directly enhance the kind of collective IQ that can help the improvement and et cetera. And so like that. So we say, okay, let's just generalize on that a little bit. Let's say we have a number of social organisms. SO, kind of cute number, huh? So each of them has a varying amount of its output is valuable. But if we have something, this process of pooling what they're doing out there like that and feeding it back in to help their own the capability improvement infrastructures, they'll all benefit by that pooling. See? And this is really qualitatively different from saying we'll depend upon a consultant running around here and coming back and telling them. It's just qualitatively different. The consultant might work fine in some instances like this, but this is the way the quality movement did it. And it just was extremely important for that. See? So this is what led us to looking at this C community, because a lot about what I just showed you here is really that business about what can help their capability improvement work better is the C. Capability improvement has to do its own work as the B activity. So we're really pooling the C in there, and that's what we show here in what we call a networked improvement community. It's pooling the C, and it's also then by being networked to say, let's really, with this dynamic knowledge repository and better tools and methods for really doing that, we can really amplify a great deal what each of these organizations is going to invest in that kind of improvement thing. So that's the sort of basic idea for the improvement community we talk about and accelerating and augmenting it. So we just say, okay, this is the sort of a thing. If you were going to go out early and you could only manage to recruit, 10 organizations to get in there to pool together, etc. So which ones would seem more attractive to you? Immediately you might say, hey, some of them, like trying to cure cancer or fix the environment, would be very important for us to get. Yeah, that end product would be important. But then the other thing to consider strategically is, what are they doing, producing, that if pooled back in would actually bootstrap you the more, add more capability to your improvement capability. So let's just get into another phase of audience participation to deal with this. We have about 10 minutes for that. So, pardon?
You may want to stay here and be the facilitator. I'll play the scribe.
Oh. Okay.
So we would like to do the same, get suggestions. Who would you suggest would be the best organization or organizations? I'll play the scribe. Doug will play facilitator.
Sure, okay. Going once? Any? Yes, Benet?
One of the issues is who would want to put the energy into being an involved social organism, and then the other, on the flip side, is who would we want? And those could be different, because I think the ones that want to be involved are the ones that are having some difficulty, or else they're not going to feel that they need to improve. Those may or may not be the candidates that we want, because we're looking for the ones that will have the high value to get back into the chain. So I think we'd have to look at that, because if they're kind of fat and happy, they might not think that they need to improve. And yet those organisms and organizations might have more to offer.
Sure, and that's terrific. So one of the things that any group that's going to try to make this work has to learn how to do is to develop the realistic value propositions, to say, if you participate in this, this is going to be the value, and they have to be strong enough to compete for all the other competing things they could spend extra resources on. So this is one of the things that the web has done a lot for, is get people aware of, oh wow, the change. So we almost got people interested 10 years ago, but it's a very different world now. So the business of a value proposition has to, on the one hand, make relatively realistic the kind of payoffs from this, and another one, the needs. What's going to happen if they don't start investing in this? And another one, maybe their pride about saying, hey, we're going to very early start working on this sort of assessment kind of thing, to say, oh, your corporation looks like it has a relative IQ of about 40. Do you contest that, or do you want to go and say, let's just shift a little bit, okay?
It seems to me that the open source programming movement is one that's a great example of where people, very large companies now, Sun, IBM, Apple, are kind of rolling over and saying, hey, this is the way I can get bug-free code. And it's good for all of us.
That's good, because the next hour and a half is all in that. Did anybody prime you for this? Okay, let's just see. Oh yes, the back row.
Also, I think there's a multiplier effect, and you just have to be able to sell that. That basically, once there's a momentum happening, then anybody who comes in and contributes can get back more than they put in. Obviously, if there's only 2 players, then each of them's only getting back the same or less than they're putting in. But if once you get to the point where there's 10 or 50 players, then each of them is getting a huge multiple of what they're putting in.
Right. That's a good point. And then part of that value proposition has to assure them that, hey, those other guys are going to be honestly about contributing. So there is a way to design that to sort of help meet that. And the other thing is, when you get back, it isn't just knowledge, like somebody can tell you about it. You have to have some of your people involved that get experience. And that's how the design really works. Okay, Norman, you got to...
Well, I was thinking about joint venture Silicon Valley and the other activities happening here in the Valley socially, and interorganizationally is a very interesting situation as well. There's so many clear problems in the Valley that challenge the rich resources that are here, and in fact, some of those problems are barriers to growth, in effect.
Oh, boy.
So, like traffic, which I feel every day.
Oh, boy.
So This is one of those areas where we could look not only at individual companies, but at intercompany cooperation with multiple sectors for improvement in a fairly clear way.
Well, that's a big part of why we talk about these improvement communities, et cetera,
Yeah.
and they call them NICs, and then the levels that those can go to, which you can have an improvement infrastructure that you can say industry-wide, or then statewide. So we're going to be knocking on California State one of these days, and finding some progressive representative from that area that we can sort of say, well, what about it? So anyway, so let's see. Eric?
Yeah, in terms of narrowing the search, it seems like the companies or organizations that are competing are probably least inclined to want to give their benefits to other organizations. I think there's a change in that.
Did that happen in the quality movement?
I see I don't know. I see that sharing going on through organizations. You'd have to correct me if I'm wrong, but through teaching but not from company to company directly. Say, hey, I found a great way to improve our quality. General Motors, why don't you take this? And it's not going to be forwarded.
It took another environment that they could collectively participate in to provide that, right? So, you push the button.
To get very concrete, I think the charity structure, the main charity structure in Silicon Valley, in Santa Clara County, which is where a lot of Silicon Valley is, collapsed recently, and I guess it's being rebuilt. Also, it turns out that Second Harvest America feeds approximately 10% of the U.S. population at some time during any given year, which, so those are two concrete examples. You might also think about why, in a country that supposedly has such a great boom, that 10% of the people find they need to be fed every year.
Well, you look at it and say, hey, the market isn't working in that respect, and there are a lot of things the marketplace doesn't do. It's been doing some marvelous things, but for a lot of collective problems like that, there has to be some other way you collectively deal with it. And we have to get collectively smarter at it. On one hand, it's easy to ignore, so people get all caught up in what their environment is, and they can ignore that. But how human is that? That's another thing. Oh, look what we've turned on. Well, Australia gets a chance here because they say they're going to escape tomorrow.
Well, actually, those people who are on the verge of entering or just entering a particular social organization are not necessarily inured yet to the processes of that organization, and therefore are probably more open to seeing more than one set of processes and being able to compare and contrast and see where things are and aren't working. Because the problem is once you get inured to something, it's very easy to not see even where it's not working. So I think narrowing down to those people can be a big help as well.
Right, and that though has two sides to it. It's when you first get an organization, it's easy to see and say why it doesn't work. But how you try to correct it, knowing the personalities and the history, etc., is the second one like that. But yes, that takes a valuable thing. All right, Eric. Go ahead. Neil.
Going back to the joint venture Silicon Valley example, for a concrete example, out of that came Smart Valley, and out of that came CommerceNet. And CommerceNet is one consortium in which companies have worked together in this area. And I think
would CommerceNet be a useful one to try to recruit?
Yeah, because I think that's a situation where companies said, okay, if we work together, then we can overcome some of the barriers in electronic commerce. So they saw a reason to help each other.
We only have a few more minutes, and let's try to concentrate on what kind of examples, and if you don't hit some, I'll bring them up like that, but who has a good example?
I think when you think about community of communities, the American Medical Association is one community of doctors, but I'd like to see them benefit from being able to talk to the other communities of doctors around the world who are chiropractors or doing acupuncture in weird parts of the world or whatever. So they all kind of learn from each other.
Yep. You got a chance?
I'd like to just take the discussion a little bit to why we want to work with what company. It seems there are certainly lots of really important problems out there that need to be solved. But one of the main things it seems here is developing the tools, whether it's a knowledge repository or if it's an open hypertext system, whatever. And I would think we'd want to choose companies to work with or organizations to work with that have problems that would be solved by the state of the art and the tools we have right now, and where we could next take them.
That would be gratifying, but will that be sort of lifting you up so you get better and better able to help them?
Well, it would certainly allow you to start working and developing the tools and get the tools up in a place where they might be used. Whereas if you take a big, huge problem...
What we're talking about, okay, what we're talking about then is there are a lot of things that would be appealing, but just which ones that could be both appealing and their involvement would accelerate things. Yeah, the bootstrapping, regenerative. You've got a chance.
One of the reasons that I decided to come to this is that there are some huge social problems around the world to do with aging and disability.
Don't talk about aging, please.
With the exception of this room, around the world there are some huge problems with aging communities and disabilities.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I decided to come to this colloquium, apart from wanting to come and hear more of Doug's work, was we want to see the growth of a global repository of knowledge that will help people remain independent. And that, I believe, is a total candidate for the type of thinking we're doing, where the person who knows the most about how to handle, say, a disabled child, in many cases is the parent, and being able to share that knowledge with other parents who have just had a disabled child is a true bootstrap situation of being able to, we will help you, you put back the knowledge that's more fresh than we give you, and we're bootstrapping our way to that.
Sure, this would be appealing to me, but I'll tell you the kind of things that I've been sort of thinking about is saying, if we get involved in the quality movement, look at the kind of processes that they've evolved in the past. A lot of them would be applicable in all kinds of improvement infrastructures and bootstrapping. And then you turn and say, well, anyway, I think we're going to quit. We'll pick up on this after a 10-minute break, and everybody don't say a word during the break because we don't want any of our Okay, we'll be back.
Very good.
Yeah.